Morning, everyone. This is Mike Kelly, CEO of ProcessBolt. I'm going to just pop up my slides real quick here and say welcome and thanks for joining us. We're here today. I have two folks here with me today, Gaurav Gaur, CTO and co-founder of ProcessBolt, and Jeremy Sneeden, the Director of Security Operations and Engineering. And what we're going to talk about today is particularly pertinent to hospitals, but also applies to other organizations that are securing devices to their network that have any sort of smart technology built into them. So first, let's just do some quick introductions. Jeremy, why don't you talk to the group a little bit about yourself, your background, and about Allina Health?
Sure. So I'm Jeremy Sneeden. I am the Director of Security Engineering and Operations at Allina Health. Allina Health is a healthcare provider in Minneapolis. We have 14 hospitals and 100 plus other locations that serve mostly the Twin Cities and a little bit of Wisconsin.
Excellent. Gaurav, why don't you talk a little bit briefly about your background?
Absolutely. My name is Gaurav. I'm the CTO and co-founder at ProcessBolt, and we are, been in the cybersecurity industry for a while now, and have seen a lot of aspects of this industry.
Excellent. Well, thanks. Let's just talk a little bit just go over what we're going to talk about today. First, to talk a little bit about ProcessBolt, what it does, and just kind of frame that for everybody. And then we'll talk about specifically about medical devices, those security risks, how Allina is securing those devices on its network, and kind of the overall broader impact. Then we'll have some questions at the end too. So first, just a quick overview of ProcessBolt and how it's different. So what ProcessBolt does as a platform is it brings together all the key elements of third-party and vendor risk and third-party vendor risk assessments and analyzation. So it automatically allows you to assess your vendors, to continuously monitor all the internet-facing attack surfaces of those vendors and of your own enterprise. And as an artificial intelligence tool, it allows you to review large policy documents by using natural language questions. The final piece of it is for the back end of it. It's for the companies like large medical device companies. Boston Scientific is a customer of ours that has to respond to a lot of these assessments in volumes. So the idea is try to solve all of the major problems around third-party security assessment in one solution. Assess your vendors, continuously monitor your vendors, and support the review of large policy documents, which is oftentimes neglected, attached to those assessments. So nice thing about the platform is we're able to support both very large multinational corporations like Nike, Aero Electronics, and Boston, but it also is affordable and easy enough to operate for small enterprises and works in just about customers in pretty much every major market segment. But let's get back to the core of this, which is to talk about devices and device security on your network. So Jeremy, let me turn it back over to you. Let's talk a little bit about what you were seeing and what brought you to ProcessBolt and how we work together to solve this problem.
Sure. So, we started building a medical device program, 6, 7, 8 years ago at Allina, because we realized we had all these devices that were on our network and they're vulnerable. And then we started really taking a look at the devices, and we found that they are very vulnerable. By the time they get to us, they're kind of old. They don't have basic security things. Finding a medical device that has antivirus or a firewall is a rarity rather than a regular thing. And then we also saw the environment increasing the amount of attacks against these IoT medical devices, those types of things. And recently, in the last year or two, healthcare has really been targeted by ransomware and other types of security attacks.
We've seen that across all of our healthcare customers, Jeremy, and it's a big problem. I mean, not only are healthcare and hospital systems in particular being disproportionately attacked, but the nature of the attacks has changed quite a bit, hasn't it?
Yeah, and that's something we've noticed, in the past when healthcare systems were attacked, it was more about exfiltrating the data and then selling the medical record, the PHI, the PII that was stolen. And as you can see in this slide, kind of the black bot breach that affected an awful lot of healthcare companies was that type of breach. They were more after the data, and then we had to deal with the ramifications of that. After that, we saw a shift of really, at least the breaches we've been involved in, the attackers were more about control of the network. They weren't exfiltrating the data. They're taking control of the network. They're locking down the network, and then they're trying to extract ransom from that lockdown. And one of the things that we've kind of had happen to us recently is our third parties are being impacted by these breaches, or our third parties. And so in 2020, we had 3 kind of major incidents, and none of them happened on our network directly, but they directly impacted us. And so that's really been the trend that we're seeing. And that's one of the reasons that doing kind of third-party assessments and really having an idea of what we're putting on our network is so important.
Very critical. And obviously now it's a matter of patient safety. And, we've seen when recent lawsuits in Mississippi and elsewhere where hospital systems are compromised and the necessary data for patient care is inaccessible. And it creates problems, and ultimately has created some lawsuits. So let's talk about the solution, Jeremy, and let's talk about how you secured the medical devices and how we work together to try to put a solution together that worked specifically for Allina.
Sure. So when we started in kind of 2005, we had this great idea. We're going to go out, we're going to find all these vulnerabilities, we're going to work with the medical device manufacturers, they're going to fix the vulnerabilities, we're going to fix the whole industry. We were very optimistic and naive about what we were going to do. And we started down that path. At the time we were buying some Baxter infusion pumps. We brought them through our old risk assessment process, and we found some vulnerabilities, and we went to Baxter and said, hey, here's these 4 vulnerabilities. Can you guys fix them? And they essentially said, no, we're not fixing them. We got to the point where we reported them up to ICS. And as you can see with the screenshot here, there were 3 of the 4 vulnerabilities could be exploited remotely. One of the things was a hard-coded password, which could be used if you had local access. And none of these were hard things to exploit, but we still couldn't get them fixed. They were fixed in subsequent devices, but in the devices that we already had purchased and owned, they weren't fixed. And this experience really shaped how we started to think about medical device security. If you can't actually fix the vulnerabilities, you have to do something else. And we kind of came up with this list of things that are happening with medical devices. First off, they're critical. They absolutely have to be on our network. They make our hospitals actually run. We're way more efficient when we can use medical devices, and the more connected they are, the more efficient they are. So we knew that we were going to have more medical devices and more of them were going to be connected. The problems come in when we purchase a medical device. They've been through so much approval and such a long process to market that they're old. When we buy them brand new, their OS is old. The components sometimes are old, and definitely the security posture is old. And then once we buy them, they stay on our network for a long time. We're not swapping out our infusion pumps every other year. We're not swapping out our big imaging machines every 3 years or 5 years, even in some cases. And so when you start combining all of these things, and then the final bullet down there, they're really expensive. So swapping them isn't even an option for us in many cases. So when we combine all of those things, we came up with a different strategy. And it was more around, let's take care of the things that we can take care of. So we started putting our medical devices into an isolated network bubble. We started building security controls around those bubbles, and then we wanted to observe the behavior inside those bubbles. The biggest problem with this was we couldn't put every single device in its own isolated VLAN, and so we needed some way to figure out if the device was really high risk, if it was medium risk, or if it was kind of a normal desktop style device that we could manage in normal ways. And we started doing that with our traditional risk assessment process. And we converted it over from our standard risk assessment process. And it took months. It is, at least at Allina, the combination of the people who own the devices a lot of times aren't the most technical, and then the people that are putting them in don't understand so much around the business, and then the manufacturer didn't necessarily want to answer our questions or didn't get back to us quickly. And that's when we really started looking for a solution where we could automate this and try to make things faster and better and get these devices secured before they get to our network. When your risk assessment process takes 6-7 months, these procurement processes weren't stopping for the risk assessment. And so we were getting devices onto our network before they had the risk assessment. And so then the controls weren't being applied. And so we reached out to ProcessBolt and we said, hey, we're looking for a way to automate our processes. Medical device manufacturers are starting to fill out an MDS2 for their devices and kind of provide that as a standard document. Can you guys read that? And can you apply our risk ratings to the MDS2 document? And they said yes. And so we started working with ProcessBolt on that. And we took our risk assessment process from that 6 to 8 months where we're going back and forth and we're dealing with the manufacturer and the business owner and the IT owner down to around 5 minutes if they have their MDS2. And it's really remarkable that we can do that even with the MDS2 kind of manually processing. It takes much longer than 5 minutes. If you want to show what the MDS2 looks like, Mike.
Yes, I will. Right here. So if you're doing this manual process that you were doing, this is what you would be working with, correct, Jeremy?
Yep, and there's several hundred questions. And when we first started working with the MDS2s, we were trying to map it back to our old risk assessment process. So you can imagine several hundred questions, trying to map it back to questions that aren't designed for medical devices and trying to get a risk rating. It was taking really forever. And that's our biggest value in ProcessBolt. We can upload an MDS2. We can quickly assess the device and we can figure out where it needs to go. And based on where it needs to go on our network, we already have a set prescription for the controls that get put in place.
And what was, well, let me go back to this slide here quickly. And what from our perspective, what was rewarding for us is, and we like this about the flexibility of our software and platform, is we can sit down with a customer, we can understand the issue that they're trying to solve. Maybe it's assessing all of your vendor network, maybe it's addressing a very specific issue like this. And we're able to look and say, Jeremy points out, not only are device manufacturers completing MDS2s, but you had to decide whether it's a current MDS2 or not a current MDS2. And if you didn't get the current MDS2, that vendor had to be assessed. So all of that was kind of just built into the system and flowed relatively smoothly, such that you were able to reduce the process down to a couple of minutes, which we're pretty proud of, and I think it's worked out as a pretty good solution for you.
Yeah, our biggest time right now is just getting the MDS2 file from the vendors. That sometimes that takes a few days, but once we get it, it really is a few minutes to do the processing. So this is just kind of an example of how we're doing things at Allina once we get the risk assessment completed. So those Baxter infusion pumps we talked about, we've categorized them as high-risk devices. We've put them on a very isolated VLAN, so those vulnerabilities can't be remotely exploited. We have very strict ICE profiles that keep them in their VLAN and don't let anything else on the VLAN. Very strict firewall rules. They can only connect to the 2 or 3 servers that they need to connect to. And then we have our UEBA system that monitors them for strange behavior. And then we also have Order to help us discover medical devices and to make sure that we're getting all of the devices into the right places. EMI, on the other hand, has a bunch of kind of medium risk devices or things that are installed on workstations that we want to monitor, but they're not high risk because they're on workstations and we can apply some other controls. So in that case, we have a handful of different devices in a single VLAN. We're still using firewalls, They're allowed to connect to different places because they need to move images and they need to manipulate patient data. But we do still have our UAPA and our order system to make sure that we're keeping the right things in the right VLANs.
And so just to refresh, this is what you were receiving, which is an MDS2. With ProcessBolt, the information comes back in data form and is bounced automatically against your risk tolerances. So it looks a little bit more like this, right? Is this what you're seeing most of the time, Jeremy?
Yeah, it's very simple. So we have a handful of categories that we look at, and then we have a final risk score on a 0 to 25 scale, and we've kind of boiled that down to certain ranges in certain categories. It's low, medium, or high, and sometimes critical. Sometimes we just don't want to buy devices that have as many issues as some of the devices do.
And we won't go into it here, but it's just appropriate for demos down the line. Each one of these data points here can be just clicked on and drilled down to determine what exactly is causing that rating. And you can set up tickets to try to get those resolved as well. But thanks, Jeremy. I really appreciate that. And we really enjoyed working with you. It's nice to get a solution that we think makes the organization safer. And the other thing I would say too is, although we're talking about medical devices on a network here, it really extends to any other connected devices to any enterprise. I mean, all of these points of vulnerability, may be low, medium, or high risk. And with Jeremy's strategy, which was so creative, is he just isolates the ones that are very high risk. Because we hear that all the time, and we'll get into a little more of the ProcessBolt platform here quickly. But most of the time, we have customers who don't want a vendor to be disqualified because of a security issue. They want the vendor to have their security protocols improved. And the other pieces of ProcessBolt's platform help get those vendors up to where the enterprise would want them to be. So Gaurav, I'm going to turn it over to you now, and we'll talk a little bit first. We'll go to the other three pieces of the ProcessBolt platform, but the first one we're going to talk about is this one. Because as you imagine, Jeremy's talking about all these medical device companies that are being assessed, either providing an MDS2 or automatically assessed. And we have a solution at ProcessBolt that helped Boston Scientific reduce their time to respond to these assessments by over 85%. So Gaurav, why don't I turn over to you and talk a little bit about what we work with Boston Scientific and other big customers who respond to a lot of questionnaires and their issues that they have.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks, Jeremy, for that excellent overview. So, as we discussed, and as Jeremy pointed out, we work to collect and analyze data in a much more automated fashion when you're providing your MDS2 to hospital systems. But when you think about the flip side of that, right, when you're a device manufacturer, when you are a software vendor to healthcare organizations, the first step in your contracting process, and more often than not on an annual basis, is when you are receiving these assessments from hospital systems. So one of the most unique aspects of our solution is not only do we work on extracting information and conducting risk assessments on your MDS2s and other formats, we also help you complete these questionnaires and assessments that you receive from your clients. And we have a click button automation behind it. In the case of Boston Scientific, for example, they were able to reduce their time to complete these assessments from days to a matter of minutes, where we look at an organization's knowledge profile, their posture, and then we look at the questionnaire. Our algorithms and AI has the ability to understand these questions that are being asked of these medical device providers, and respond to these assessments just by looking at an organization's knowledge base and their profile in our system. So it is very easy to use. The learning curve on this is less than half an hour, and once you implement our solution, you'll be able to complete these assessments, and save almost 85-90% of the time you spend today on this.
And what the other ancillary benefit that we're hearing from Boston and from other customers is, if you think about responding to these assessments in volume, and your enterprise is going to continue to get hit by more and more of these assessments as time goes on. What's nice about this, in addition to the fact that it just makes it really quick and efficient, that you just click on a button and it pre-populates all the answers you've responded to before, but it keeps all of your data in a segregated database. So if people change jobs, if you have different people trying to respond to these questionnaires, the data is all contained. So the software works that it will continue to generate the right responses that have already been approved by your organization. So a lot of benefits to that. It's a really unique solution, and obviously love to show that to any of you after the call. So let's look at the other two pieces of the platform, Gaurav, before we get to questions. As
Yeah.
we talked about, there's a number of components to the whole vendor risk platform. One is to assess your vendors to make sure they're secure on at least an annual basis. But then the second is you need to continuously monitor those attack surfaces or internet-facing attack surfaces, both for your own enterprise and your vendors. So, Gaurav, let's talk about Threatscape and how that works in conjunction with the other tools in our platform.
Yeah, absolutely. So like Mike mentioned, right? I mean, assessments by their very nature are point-in-time activities. And granted, a lot of medical devices don't change from every 6 months. But there could be changes in a vendor's internet-facing posture. There could be changes in reported breaches or ransomware attacks on a particular vendor or on your own organization. There could be open databases that appear between assessments, right? So what Threatscape does is it is a truly continuous attack surface management system that lets you look at your vendors, look at your own organization, or look at any organization and see, how their posture on the internet can impact you. It identifies attack surfaces. It has hundreds of criterias, risk ranked on how they can impact you as an organization. It collects its own threat information. It collects all the breach notifications and alerts you in real time, whenever on a daily basis it finds new red flags on a particular entity. The other thing is it actually integrates with both when you're assessing your vendors as well as when you're receiving assessments. So when you assess a vendor and you ask them a particular question, let's take an example. Let's say we are asking the vendor, do you encrypt your databases, right? And they say yes to that question, but all of a sudden Threatscape finds an unencrypted open database on the internet on that vendor. It will alert you and say, this relates to a question you have asked off of this vendor, and we have found information that actually counters what this vendor is telling you. Similarly, when you're responding to assessments, it alerts you and say, hey, before you answer this database question, I am aware that you have these two databases unencrypted, open on the internet. So before you answer this question, either you fix this issue or at least be careful answering this question. Be aware that this information is out there. So extremely automated. It collects hundreds of different information pieces and alerts you in real time.
And again, I'll show you what it looks like here. This is what a report will look like. And Gaurav, I'll have you talk to this briefly. But again, the solution is built because a number of our customers said, listen, we know some of our vendors need work in improving their security protocols. We don't want you to just tell us their score is a 60% or their grade is a D. We want you to provide us with actionable intelligence that we can share with our vendors to make their environments more secure. Because as I mentioned, most of those vendors are selected for a lot of reasons: responsiveness, price, quality. It isn't necessarily their security protocol that's driving the bus here, but we want to make sure that they are safe, and we want to help our customers make their vendors more safe and allow vendors to improve their position. So if it's an RFP situation and they do get assessed, they come out on top. So let's talk quickly about this report, what it looks like, Gaurav, and then let's go on to the last piece of platform and take some questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, the reports are highly actionable. They're definitely condensed for consumption by higher management, but at the same time, they provide drill down capability. You can even share these reports with your vendors, right? So when you see a new issue, it's as easy as clicking a button saying, share this with the vendor so they can actually start working off of these, or you can create issues that are trackable, on the vendor side. But extremely actionable reports gives you concrete information on where the asset is located, ahead, what they should be fixing, what is the business impact of this red flag, and what could happen if they don't fix it.
Excellent. And then the final piece of our platform. So if you think of your whole third-party vendor risk strategy, you assess your vendors annually, you continuously monitor those vendors' internet-facing attack surfaces. But in nearly every case, you get these assessments back, and oftentimes they're large policy documents attached to those. Frequently, what we see from our customers is, yes, we received the document, but no, we didn't have time to go through that document to determine if it is what it says it is, let alone answers the questions that we wanted answered. So we developed this Doc AI piece of the platform, which uses contextual deep natural language processing and artificial intelligence to allow you to ask questions of a document. So Gaurav, why don't you talk a little, just briefly, and then we'll wrap up here about Doc AI and how it's used relative to document review.
Yeah, absolutely. So like Mike mentioned, one of the key pieces of any assessment process is collecting documentary evidence from a vendor. And typically this evidence is very verbose in nature. And what's becoming more and more frequent these days is skipping the entire assessment process in lieu of a SOC 2 report, for example. Again, very verbose document. And then, at the end of the day, what ends up happening is it becomes a checkbox item where, yes, we have collected the documentation from vendor, but no, we haven't had time to review those documents that the vendor supplied. So we have a fully automated deep AI solution that actually has an 8th grade English reading ability and will read these documents on your behalf. You can apply pre-drafted questionnaires to these documents, or you can type English language questions. An example I always like to use is, for example, if you receive your vendor's password policy, right? And all you're interested in is when was the last time this policy was updated, and what is the password structure? When do they require the passwords to be updated? You can type all these questions just in plain English language. Doc AI will read it. Read the whole document and answer those questions from that document on your behalf. So that way, you get, again, actionable intelligence out of these very verbose text-based documents. And it accepts, Word documents, text-based documents, Excel files, even PowerPoints, because a lot of times, a lot of organizational knowledge is buried in PowerPoints too.
Yeah. And what's also nice is it's not just single documents, it's multiple documents as well. So anyway, thanks, Gaurav. And thanks, Jeremy. And I just want to wrap it up, and we have some time for questions. So hopefully some of you have typed questions in the margin here. I'll get to the end.
Yep, go ahead, sorry.
Okay, I was just going to say our contact information is here too. And feel free, obviously, to reach out to me directly. We obviously love to demo this, but what we've tried to show you is we have a flexible, very flexible, easy to operate solution that can be adapted to adapted to solve a number of problems surrounding third-party risk, whether it's very specific, like medical devices, or whether it's a more broad situation. Our software maps to any sort of regulatory compliance structure. So once you tell us what the issue is, it's very easy for us to adapt the platform to meet your company or your hospital or your device manufacturer's individual needs. For all three of those things: assessing your vendors, continuously monitoring them, and reviewing the policy documents that are attached, plus responding in volume to questionnaires if that's applicable to you. So anyway, I will close this out, but Gaurav, you said that we had a couple of questions in there. Let me see.
Yes. So let me address some of these questions. Question one is: are the questions going to be at the end of the presentation or during any time in the course of the presentation? That is almost self-answering. We have waited till the end to answer that question. Will the slides of this presentation be available? We can absolutely make the slides available. This session is also recorded, and you should automatically get a recording of this session as well. If you do not, you're more than welcome to get in touch with us at mike@processbolt.com, and we'll be happy to provide this information to you. Another question that we have is MDS2 the only format that we work with? The answer is no. We are format agnostic. Now, some formats are much more standardized than others. For example, MDS2, NIST, HECVAT, ISO. But we do work with pretty much any format, including custom formats and in-house developed formats of assessments. That is not a problem as far as our platform is concerned.
Yeah, I think that's really important to note, Gaurav, is that if you are starting or you're trying to improve your vendor assessment program, we have templates that you can use, all the basic ones, ISO, NIST, et cetera, HECVAT for educational institutions. And you can use those templates, or you can create a completely custom one, which Nike did, or you can have some sort of hybrid. Here, we're going to start with NIST, and we're going to add a few questions that are pertinent to our enterprise. So
Yep.
it's highly flexible and obviously easy to set up. And the other thing too is, back to that, it isn't just this process of managing both receiving the MDS2s and assessing those who don't provide the MDS2. But in other cases, Oregon Health and Sciences Hospital and others, we can work with you through the whole process of onboarding vendors, assessing vendors, and having that flow into your supply chain and purchasing process. And we've done that because the platform also has very easy to operate and configurable workflows. So
another excellent question that just came up is, could the assessments expand beyond security risks potentially to cover broader technology assurance? And absolutely. In fact, that is one of the primary use cases that our customers end up using us for. They might start off with security assessments, but sooner or later, it always evolves into a broader use case around security, privacy, even due diligence. So
and
that is
ESG.
again, and ESG too, yeah, exactly. So that is where the flexibility of the platform shines, is where you can use our platform for any data collection exercise that could be around assessments, both for third parties as well as internal. Not last, but just the latest question is, what criteria is used to determine your risk matrix, since patient data is at stake and will impact on safety? I think that is, and Jeremy, you might want to chime in here, but as far as the platform is concerned, the risk matrix criteria is primarily defined by you, the user of the software, right? So our platform allows you to work with your risk matrix. This could be, our standard scoring, or this could be your internal scoring, as in the case of Allina, it determines the system risk profile based on very complex calculations that are built around the MDS2. But Jeremy, would you like to add to the risk matrix question here?
Sure. So we do ask a couple of filtering questions during our medical device procurement process for a couple of reasons. One is we don't want to risk assess scalpels and things like that, right? We're really only concerned about network connected things or things that contain PHI. So we use those filtering questions to flavor the impact of a potential breach on the medical device system. And then we've taken the MDS2 and we've custom scored certain questions that help us add into the full risk score. And that's where some of that categorization and some of the flexibility comes in, where we don't assess every single question on the MDS2 with ProcessBolt. We use a bunch of them to mix together to get our risk score. So ours is really custom to Allina, and we do have some impact questions up front.
And we see that from a lot of our customers too. And that's one of the reasons, although we do have benchmarking that we provide, we really work with the customer to get a scoring methodology that fits their enterprise. For example, CHS, Nike, Aero Electronics may have way different risk tolerances than Allina does, or some of our hospital customers, or some of our device customers. So the system is flexible enough that we can provide benchmarked risk tolerances, but really each organization is different. And so we like to work with them and develop methodologies, like Jeremy said, that are custom to that specific organization.
I think that is the end of our questions. But a couple of key questions that whenever we do this are often asked. We might as well cover some of those as well. One of the things that we are often asked is, how do you collect Threatscape data? Where is it sourced from? So when you're doing continuous monitoring on vendors, that data is primarily sourced by us, and it is sourced in real time. We collect the data on your vendors. This is publicly visible data, so there's not an intrusive scan going on. But at the end of the day, we have a lot of different parameters that we look at for vendors, and then we correlate those parameters along with data that we see out on the web, even on the dark web, around breach notifications and adverse news events. We also correlate that data to sanction information in case one of your vendors lands in sanctioned party lists. So all that is combined together, but the data collection is primarily on our end, and we actually look at a lot of parameters when we do the Threatscape data. We actually just got a question. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, let me just bolt on to that. What's really important is some of the competitors in that continuous monitoring space, I won't mention the names, but one of the reasons we built this is from complaints about those type of things. Virtually all of them are acquiring aggregated data from an outside network. So by the time you get that aggregated data, most of the times it's stale. So it was really important for us not to rely on purchased aggregated data, but to source our own. Anyway, you had another question, Gaurav?
Yeah, so one question is your software able to determine, able to look at IAM and be able to determine if it follows MFA? That actually depends on, if you open that. I mean, can we look at that data? Absolutely. Can we recommend configurations? Absolutely. But that depends on our visibility. And a lot of times that is not visible out on the internet for a good reason. So it just depends. If you provide us the visibility to your IAM, we absolutely would be able to help you with that.
And that's a good question with respect to integrations. I mean, this platform, it can be, in some cases, it's used in lieu of a GRC. In other cases, we plug into the GRC just to provide best-in-class third-party assessment. But we can integrate with every major source of truth out there. I mean, for Allina, it's Workday. In other cases, it's ServiceNow. It's all the big GRC platforms. The integrations are not complex to take the information out and push it back into the appropriate places.
I know we are running out of time, but I think we got one question just now. Can Stride threat model be applicable in the software? Yes, you can build your assessment framework around Stride, or actually any model, right? So at the end of the day, when we built our platform, we built it to be model agnostic, or actually allow you to build those models in our software. So we can build any model, even complex calculated models, and that should not be a problem as far as the platform is concerned.
And that is all part of the setup process. There's no additional fee for that. So it's a pure software as a service model. It's zero code. Once it's installed, there are virtually no service fees, although you can contact us anytime to make changes if you can't do it yourself. But it's really very simple. And during that onboarding process, we'll sit with you like we did with Allina and make sure we understand exactly the problem that you're trying to solve. And we'll come up with a solution. The software will map to that solution. And once we turn it on, generally all three of these functions, the continuous monitoring, the assessment, and the document review, can be handled by one person on the InfoSec team. So.
Perfect. I think that was the end of our questions, and we were able to cover all of the questions asked, which is phenomenal. I would like to thank everybody for attending today's webinar, and hopefully it was valuable. But back to you, Mike.
Yeah, and Jeremy, thank you very much. Appreciate your time and your effort here. I think it's great, especially in this era where we can share best practices in combating some of this ransomware attack. So, Jeremy, thank you very much for your time and effort here. And then Anybody else? Obviously, we'd love to demo this for anyone. We do offer free proofs of concept. The platform can be operated either as a completely integrated solution, or each of these components we offer individually. Some people just want the threatscape. Some people just want the response solution. That's all available too. So please reach out to us either through the website, www.processbolt.com, or even just reach out to me directly. I'm happy to get you to the right place and help try to get your problem solved. So thanks very much for your time today, everybody. And we look forward to connecting down the road. Take care.
Thank you.